and answer the critical questions we have before us. Kia ora.
Speaker.
Right, Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, there is a raw irony about the events surrounding Judith Collins because on the 31st of October last year, she was in China to give a speech to the Executive Leadership Academy in Pudong. And there she gave this very lofty speech about a matter which is dear to all of our hearts and hitherto had been to hers. She said in that speech that she was there to contribute to a culture of openness and transparency. And she went on to say the law provides, and I quote her, the law provides mechanisms for the public to find out what different branches of the government are doing. We believe that this builds trust and confidence in our system, end of quotes. She was talking about the glory of New Zealand's political system and no doubt her role in it. And then what do we find on the Oravida website? The translation is as clear as daylight, that here's a minister over there, not on a Justice and ACC trip, which is her portfolio. No, she's on a trade trip, engaged in a family operation, and she was not merely, as she tried to blithely say, having a cup of tea on the way to the airport. With milk. And she said, well, what's wrong with milk? I like milk. And apparently scampi as well. She left that part out because that was the Sanford connection, and Sanford is owned by who? Why, the National Party president's family. Just like Sky City, tawdry, ugly, terrible venal behaviour. And I know Jerry loves it because Jerry once was for about 5 weeks as a director with Goodfellow on the new Christchurch Casino. Oh, yes, Jerry wants us to forget that, but there was Jerry taking a job as a director, he and Goodfellow, on the new Christchurch Casino proposal. How venal is that? Now, donkey deep is the word for it. John Key deep, in fact. Can I just say this? This is what Mr. Key said. Earlier this week, he said that the Collins case differed from his former minister, Richard Worth, because there was no personal gain involved in her visit to Oravida. That is demonstrably false. There was every personal benefit involved, and that's why you had the ambassador to China, the consul general from New Zealand in Shanghai, and border officials, taxpayers' money, all involved in promoting her husband's business. And that, if you read that website, the Chinese translation into English, you will see how much she was involved. In fact, they went on to say that she tasted Oravida's fresh milk and the New Zealand scampi and couldn't stop praising these products. Judith Collins instructed that she is expecting to continue the cooperation and exchange between Oravida and New Zealand. She's on a trade trip now, isn't she? And based on this, to develop biomutual relationships further. She's in the here donkey deep, and yet the National Party, of course, they've got their heads down, because they should be ashamed of themselves. How glad I am I left that party. How glad I am I left that party. How glad I am I left that party. Because I can go to bed at night feeling good about myself and not have to walk down the street and be shamed when by the constituencies talk to me, because when the voters talk to me, I cough and splutter and change the subject, like Jerry does. No, sirree. And then he said, and this is what John Key said, he made it clear that if the Cabinet Advice offered, the Cabinet Advice, Office Advice rather, suggested a problem, I would take action. That's what he said. Now, the Cabinet Advice was given not with knowledge of the Chinese translated into English, no, just a few sentences of English. And don't tell me that the Cabinet officials are so bad now that when asked to investigate something, they didn't walk downtown, get a Chinese interpreter to find out what they were investigating. Mr. Key, he's caught now red-handed, totally red-handed. Look, here we go. Here we go. He refuses to release the Cabinet advice on this matter when the advice was never checked against the Chinese translation, and then he went out and told all the journalists that it was. He simply failed to tell the truth, and so did Judith Collins. Here's the real issue, though. There's a smell growing on this, and it will intensify each day. The thing is, there's more to come. There always is. There always is. There's always more. And the public has now lost confidence in the Minister of Justice because more and more is being revealed of her business connections and associates. By the way, his name is Wong Tung. Wong Tung. Wong Tong. Wong Tung. Not Wong Tong as other people have been saying it. And it seems like Wong Tung did Wong. The reality is, there's an old saying that Caesar's wife must be above reproach. No, it's not discussing sunshine, because that member there was a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he knows full well that you cannot, as a foreign affairs official, be involving yourself in trying to advantage a venal politician's interests. No, Mr. Bill, I can see why Whangarei or Whangarei didn't want you, because they've got some standards up there. I know, I come from there. And he stood there and he got beaten as a sitting MP in Parliament. Now, I'm telling him, the meaning is very clear about Caesar's wife. Of those who are granted the privileges of power and position, we also require accountability. Judith Collins has twisted and turned as the whole sorry, sordid saga has emerged. And as each layer has been peeled back, the uglier and more rotten and disgraceful the whole business looks. Imagine if any of us over here had done that. They'd be screaming blue murder. In fact, I recall when we didn't do that, and they were still lying and screaming blue murder. As Mike Williams pointed out over the weekend in one of the Sunday Star papers, and I'm very grateful to him, finally, for telling the truth. We have had plenty of this dodgy stuff from this national government. You did, and I'm very grateful to the Labour Party for actually seeing the truth. And Mike Williams probably was the reason why, and I'm grateful to him. But here's the National Party over there, prepared to malign and defame and traduce someone else's reputation without facts, sitting there using their majority, and today one of theirs is found out to be worsening in her attitude towards honesty, and they want to cover it up. Plenty of dodgy stuff like that, Sky City, for example. Also, the Antons meal. They've got the effrontery to attack other members of Parliament in this House, and they raised $105,000 at a restaurant in Auckland where Mr. Key spoke, and charged each attendee $5,000. Just up the street from his house. Pardon? I've read the Electoral Act, and so has the National Party. And that's just a deceitful device where sometimes... No, Mr. Brownlee. Mr. Brownlee, I know that you have sold $5,000 plate dinners and never even turned up to eat the dinner. It's just a device. We know that. It's like the Waitemata Trust. Again, a heinous device which they used for darn years, and they had the effrontery to challenge other parties with a trust. What a disgrace they are. They look in the mirror every time they make an allegation. The Prime Minister's on record as having stood in this House, and he said this, you know. I asked him about the decision-making responsibility, and he said, as Prime Minister, I have the responsibility for protecting the integrity of the decision-making process of executive government and maintaining public trust in the executive. I have always expected and demanded that my ministers act lawfully and behave in a way that upholds and is seen to uphold the highest ethical standards. Well, Mr. Key, here's the day of truth. This is the moment when New Zealand gets to see if he stands by his words, or are they just hot air, empty and meaningless. You know, he says, personally, I've been of the view that transparency is a good thing. As Prime Minister, I've led that charge. And when he was asked that, yes, he said, I stood by that statement, which was made in the context of discussing reform of MPs' remuneration, travel privileges and transparency around expenses. And here is the expense account of $36,000 plus, associated in part with a familial connection with a business, and the National Party has the effrontery and audacity to think they can get away with it. Well, the campaign started, and they're off to a shocking start. Now, I want to say to those backbenchers in the National Party, hiding now, probably watching TV, all those backbenchers whose knees are starting to knock, you could stop the rot now by saying we will not put up with this. There has to be the same accountability that was demanded of Pansy Wong and Richard Worth. They were far more innocent in this context than this senior minister, who used to be on the Law Society, who was one of the first to go out and give her views about other MPs' behaviour from a legal opinion point of view, and now she's been hoisted by her own legal haughty petard. This is the day of reckoning for Mr Key. And hitherto, he has dramatically failed.
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, can I first put on record my absolute disgust